Good evening. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. I'll be tonight's host, along with my guest, Emanuela Palmares. And I was expecting a phone call here. The cat's usually pretty prompt. Where's the cat? Well, I'm just going to pretend that the cat called me because he always calls me and he always says the same thing. And that's Basil Buddha Cat Present, by the way, from the TV show Basil Buddha Cat Presents! Exclamation point, or for tonight's purposes, oh.
Your kitty cat says someone is trying to call you.
There you go.
Kitty says hurry up, Annette.
Okay. Hey, you're a little late calling. You're supposed to call right at the beginning of the show. Because we're gonna put your graphic up on the screen to plug your show. Now, for tonight's purposes, we're actually gonna do it a little differently. Instead of saying Basil Buddha Cat Presents! Exclamation point, and I'm gonna probably need some help from Victor on this. Basil Buddha Gatto presenta I punto de exclamación. Okay, and Portugese. Okay, good. See, Basil speaks a lot of different languages, but I don't. Matter of fact, quick note about Basil. He likes to remind me about how cat has. Am I doing this right? Yeah. Okay. He likes to remind me about how cat, with just about up to 1 million words, concepts, ideas in the cat language, but he also likes to remind me about how the dog language only has actually 4 concepts. Feed me, scratch my belly, take me for a walk, and oops, I piddled on your carpet. So that's, okay, did I do okay? Okay, good. Okay, now we're going to get on with the show, Basil. Thanks. Okay, as I said, with me we have camera 2, please, Emanuela Palmares, who is editor of Tribuna.
Yes, editor of Tribuna newspaper.
Now, sometimes I think out loud that it's Tribuna, and sometimes I think it's La Tribuna. What's the difference?
Let's put that question to rest because it happens a lot. Thank you for asking. It's just Tribuna. There's no La.
Okay.
It's just Tribuna.
So like the Chicago Tribune?
Yep. Just Tribuna.
Okay.
Just
now, how would it be
Tribuna.
different if it were La Tribuna?
Then you're saying the Tribune.
The Tribune, yeah.
Yes, and we are just Tribuna.
Tribuna, okay.
Just Tribuna.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Now, the real reason why we're here today is to talk about elections. Now, here it is. We're early on in 2017. 2018 seems like a long way off. But, in fact, it's really not.
No.
And we're trying to motivate, just like a couple of months ago I had Raheb Ali Brennan on, who ran in the 2nd Assembly District. I had him on to talk to the young folks, to motivate them to get out there now. Don't wait until it's next year, because you need to get out there now and find some candidates and formulate a party platform and get out there and start talking to the voters. It's the only way to do it. It's a long, tedious process, and you can't fit it into 6 months. You've got to start now, and you've got over a year left before the 2018 elections. Now, Victor was here in the audience. Victor was telling me before the show about the excitement of getting out there and helping Emanuela in her quest for the state House of Representatives in her district to get out there. He had an opportunity to get out there and meet a lot of people, and it gave him an opportunity to overcome, which I'm sure he wasn't shy, but he claims he was shy beforehand. But it helped him overcome that shyness, and it was a great experience. But first of all, tell everybody here about your experience of actually running for office.
You know, it was a life-changing experience. I loved it. And it really started with the process of me becoming an American citizen, a naturalized American citizen.
Yeah.
And one of the questions they ask you is, what are the responsibilities of an American citizen? And it lists a couple. It talks about volunteering on election day. It talks about voting. It talks about running for office. And I had done most. The only one I hadn't done yet was running for office. And I have always been involved in politics, not directly but indirectly through my work in the Tribuna. Had been covering issues that affect the state of Connecticut and our city for most of my adult life. and really felt that I was not being adequately represented, especially when I looked at the shift of demographics within my district, and that representation hadn't changed in 30 some odd years. So I was inspired to try, and it really taught me a lot about Danbury. It challenged a lot of my stereotypes. It really made me grow to love this community in a much deeper way, and really understand that it's our job as the next generation to challenge the political system, and understand that sometimes we're being fed through information in order to keep us comfortable, and that's not really the reality of the politics that we're in.
Well, Danbury is a great melting pot. It always has been.
Yes, yes.
You had back in the 1950s, you had the Portuguese came. The Portuguese were Portuguese rather than as opposed to the Brazilian Portuguese, who are finding their way in more now. You had the Southeast Asians in the 70s.
Yes, yes.
You had, and now you have all the different Central American and South American and Mexican American people who are migrating into America, because after all, who doesn't want to be an American? I mean, well, as long as things are fair and equitable, it's a great place to be.
Yeah,
Sometimes we have to
and
fight some
in comparison
battles.
sometimes for people that come from places where it's really not fair and equitable. Even, you know, we're not a perfect country, but we are still the, you know, the jewel of all countries. And we have to understand that sometimes it's in the process of being able to question how great we are that we are great, right?
Absolutely.
So we do have to challenge the system at times. You do have to do a lot of work and not just accept things as they are. And I think that's the beauty of the political process here, you know, is that you get to do that. You get to be able to do that regardless if your family hasn't been in politics for 3 generations in, regardless if you haven't been in the ballot for 30 some more years. You can get that started and cause people to pause and think, hey, I may have an option this year. Why not try something different? But you know, Danbury is my home, and I love it. I've been here since I was 10 years old. I lived in downtown for most of my life, in a Gilda Silva apartment that my parents rented when we got here from Brazil. The first couple of years of our business at Tribuna, we cleaned houses in the morning and did the paper at night. My dad works construction to this day. He was able actually to buy the company that gave him his first job. So now he's the owner.
That's fantastic.
So, you know, we have a very classic immigrant story, because when I look around my community, I'm not the exception. My story is the same story of most people. I ended up doing different things with it, but the fact that we came from that place of renting an apartment from Joe Da Silva and then owning a house in Danbury and owning a business and doing what we're able to do, it's pretty much the goal and the story of most immigrant families, whether we're talking about the Italian, the Irish, the Lebanese, the Portuguese, the Guatemalan, the Ecuadorian, the Brazilian. That's who we are. And in this beautiful place that we call Danbury, that we know also that is not perfect, we have chosen to settle and raise families and create one of the most diverse cities in the whole entire country. And that's something that's worth fighting for and really being a part of.
What was the language dynamic of your family when you arrived here? That's to say, I know kids will pick up a language very quickly because kids are more flexible in terms of the way they learn quicker than their parents do. But how about, did you have grandparents and parents that came along with your family?
No, I came with my parents and my older sister and my little brother, who was, I think, 1. And my sister spoke English because she took lessons in Brazil, and she was already like in high school. But no, I mean, I went to Broadview Middle School. I'll never forget my first day at school. I couldn't go to the bathroom because I had an old school ESL teacher, Mrs. Salomon, and I love her to death. She's retired now, but her rule was no language other than English spoken in our ESL classroom. And at that time, believe it or not, I was one of 3 Brazilians at Broadview. And so this was like 20 years ago. Like, it's impossible to imagine only 3 Brazilians at Broadview at this point, right?
Definitely, yeah.
And I remember that I can only figure out to say that I was sick. So she sent me to the nurse, and then the nurse allowed me to speak to her, and then she figured out I needed to go to the bathroom.
Okay.
I mean, I really had no idea of what to say, and I didn't know how to communicate at all. So middle school and high school, they were very challenging times for me. It was kind of like figuring out like what's happening. At the time, you were undocumented, so the future was very, very, you know, unstable for us. We didn't know what was going to happen for us as a family, as far as our possibilities went as children. You know, are we going to go to college? Are we not going to go to college? And this is really why politically I am a mixture of different platforms and different values. You know, I've made myself a promise that when I got involved is that I could never do anything that would be contrary to my life story. I could never be for or against policies that I knew at one point would have benefited me. And then if I kept true to that compass, that moral compass, and the deeper moral compass of my Christianity and my faith, that I could do this. The moment that I swayed away from that, that's when it was going to get dicey for me, and I shouldn't do it anymore. So, you know. So
very true to your values, but at the same time, very independent.
Yes, and it's a very difficult thing to be at this day and age. And this is
especially as a teenager.
Yes.
I got it. As a teenager, we all want to conform. We all want to be like everybody else, and we're afraid to be the least bit different.
And I have a theory that adults who are very involved in politics are the equivalent of a teenager in high school. They're very cliquey.
That's okay.
They're very cliquey.
Okay, I'm following. Yeah.
And they're very territorial.
Yeah.
And they usually don't like the kid that's able to kind of like flow through all groups. That's usually the weirdo, because they can't put a finger on them.
Yeah.
And I'm that weirdo.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm that.
Square peg.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because I think when we talk about, especially on the climate that we're in right now, when there's a lot of talk about politics and compassion together, right, in the dialogue right now, usually that compassion is directed towards one segment and not the other, right? Like we cannot talk about having compassion for Syrian refugees and not have compassion to understand a person who was born and bred in this country, who is white and lives off the Appalachian Trail and is in poverty and voted for Trump.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Like
odd.
if you want to have
there's a lot of very
compassion,
odd combinations. Yeah.
if you want to have compassion, where's the compassion for that person too? And try to understand why, what happened. You know, what happened to your family? What kind of generational situation are you in that's placed you in a way that you are hungry and you are in the United States of America?
I know exactly where you're coming from, because I know I have friends that have a group that have adopted a Syrian family. And my friends are worried right now. They cannot divulge where the family lives, because there's enough nuts out there. There aren't a lot of them. Danbury, I think, is a very open-minded city. It has to be open-minded city towards immigrants,
has no choice.
because by definition, that is a city of immigrants. But there are a couple of nuts out there that, if they were to find out where this family lives, could do them harm, and probably would. So it's kind of a crazy time, especially those people who claim to be Christian and yet have these very un-Christian ideas to, send them back home.
Right,
let them die.
This is where I really find myself when I look at my faith. And we should never really create policy around faith, but to imagine a world where faith, it's not going to influence policy also, it's ridiculous, right? Because when we look at history, look at the amount of influence the Catholic Church pretty much created a political system. So let's not, we can separate, but we can't separate,
Correct,
ideology. But as a Christian, immigration is a story of Jesus Christ, right? It's a story of the Bible, of people moving from place to place, trying to find something better, helping those who are in need.
Yeah. It's a story of a country, the United States, the colonies, that threw off the British because the British had a state religion, and they wanted to force the colonists to follow the tenets of the Church of England. And people said, no, we don't want a state religion. We want to be, and we had at that time, we had people from all faiths here. We had Quakers, we had Muslims, we had, you name them.
Yeah.
Everybody was here.
But this issue has always been kind of like a cloud over it, right? Like faith is always sort of involved indirectly or directly. And for me, the places where I know that we should look at with more compassion when it comes with that crossover with policy, are the social justice issues. Like that's what we're talking about, when we say social justice, we're really saying compassion. We need to be compassionate about these areas because there's human beings who have been put in circumstances, they're outside of their power to change them. And we as a society can have some sort of an impact in providing some sort of relief. Now, the measure of that relief, how that relief is delivered onto those people, that's where the political debate comes on. Do we partner with the private sector? Do we create a government agency? That's where I think that the platforms need to have their discussions around, not whether or not human beings are worth helping.
Yeah.
Right?
So starting on the presumption that, that people are not refugees by choice. They didn't choose to be refugees. They didn't choose to have a war going on in the country that they happen to be living in.
And there's a difference between refugees and immigrants, right, that are just coming to venture on their own. So there is a lot of layers to this, but when we're talking about everyone in one big broad brush, right, that's where we lose ourselves and we lose that compassion because we're trying to figure people out in large groups and blocks. We're not giving ourselves the time to look at each situation on its own. And as someone who did a lot of doors and talked to a lot of people and kind of went into this with a lot against my way, right? I am a openly undocumented at some point, naturalized American, Latina, who's Republican. You know? You open up a door to me, you're already kind of like, what is this?
Well, you're too young, you're too young to remember this, obviously, but back in, you go back to the 1960s, and it was actually the Republican Party that was the socially more progressive party. Democrats owned the Dixiecrats, which were basically Southern racist Democrats.
Well, this is, so I'm a nerd, and I love history. So when I had to make, and again, it's funny because as a naturalized citizen, you're making these decisions as an adult.
Yeah.
You're not just making them by proxy because your dad was and your mom was. So I'm studying this, I'm like I'm gonna have to choose a party, like, what am I gonna do?
Yeah.
And looking back into history, through the process of studying for my citizenship, and then obviously going above and beyond and buying like a ton of books, it's going crazy, I really saw that I aligned myself more with a very classic, historic Republican platform.
Back in the day,
Right. I'm talking like 1860 stuff, right?
1860 to 1960, because they were
exactly.
In fact, and I have great conversations with friends of mine about you know, who's your favorite president, and my two favorite presidents of all time are, in fact, Republicans. Not like today's Republicans by any means. They're very different. You have Teddy Roosevelt and Dwight Eisenhower, who were very, very, very different than today's Republicans. So the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, socially,
both parties have shifted.
Well, they've all actually kind of flipped around and changed places.
Both parties have played each other's role. That's how I like to see it. So there's very little more ground, but those that have a short memory see that they have, but those that have a long memory in history understand there's very little more ground at the finger pointing at this point when you look at it retrospectively. But I really felt that I would line myself up more with the Republican Party on a philosophical standpoint.
The traditional,
Yes, and when I looked at the one issue that we would never line up, which is immigration, because of the direction they're looking at, I also had my non-negotiables on the Democratic side because I'm pro-life. So
we'll see. Well, I want to jump in there because what I like to tell people is that I'm pro-life and I'm pro-choice, meaning that I believe in the sanctity of life, but my belief in the sanctity of life doesn't end when a baby's born. Like for some people in the political world, once a baby's born, they basically say, "You're on your own, kid."
I call it pro-life and pro-living.
There you go. There you go.
Because I'm also against the death penalty.
There's a good consistency there. Yep.
You know, I think that I'm also for us looking at what kind of life we're providing for a child that's living, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't want someone just to be born just for the sake of my own conscious to feel like I've done something.
Not just a number, yeah.
What are we looking at poverty? Are we looking at reforming our justice system to make sure that people are giving a fair? Are we looking at the whole bootstrap situation and acknowledging some people don't have shoes, let alone bootstraps to pull themselves up from? So again, for me, that's more of a conversation of compassion. But does the line?
There's the Christianity,
right?
And I will say that I think all major religions, and even folks that don't ascribe to any religion at all, all have that basic faith and that basic good moral underpinnings.
Right.
All of us do.
Right, and I also think that it's a question when it comes to being pro-life or pro-choice that science is answering. If you look at the scientific advances that have been done about, babies being able to live premature from 22 weeks on, not 25, right? I love NPR.
Yep.
And one of my favorite shows is Radiolab. And they had a wonderful show about a couple journalists who had a 22-week-old baby.
Yeah.
And it caused them to question, because their child now is alive and super well.
Yeah.
And they were like, wow, like how do we feel about this issue now when we actually have seen science?
Well, that's why they call it pro-choice. Because pro-choice includes having a baby.
Right, right. It's your choice. It's your choice to have.
Having a baby or not having a baby.
Yeah, and
without government interference either way.
Absolutely, yeah. And I understand that. And I think that what I thought was interesting about the show is that if science continues to advance, I think science would actually be more of a vocal voice in that debate than religion at some point. At some point, I think science may take the lead because of the advancement that's going to be made.
I'd like to think that's the case because science is based on fact. And although you and I, as devout Christians, we understand what faith is. Faith is believing in something that you have no tangible evidence of.
Right.
We don't know. I can't prove that there's a God or there's not a God. But it's just something that I believe.
It's my thing, and it's your thing, right?
I believe it's faith. Faith is based on believing in something that you have no.
And it's just like jeans. Not every cut is going to work for everybody.
True.
Not everyone should wear skinny jeans. And that's what I say. Not everyone should wear a boot cut.
I'm not going there.
It's not for everybody, So it's everyone has their set of beliefs, and I am confident enough in mine that whoever else is that's different than mine doesn't threaten me and doesn't offend me. So if you are Muslim, you have your space in the society. I am a Christian, and this is what I believe in. And ultimately, we're all understanding the concept that there's something above us that is greater than all of us. And that's a beautiful thing for human beings to kind of be on the same page on, even if they're not on the same page exactly on how to get there. But when it comes to politics and being a young person that's a Republican that's run for office in a city like Danbury, this kind of conversation is the kind of diversity that I want to bring to the platform. And I think that only by having more people, I hate to say young people, but I just think that only by understanding that it's my generation's job to create a new reality politically, we can't complain. And a new reality where we go beyond the letter after our name.
So you can really only change a party or a system from within. It's very hard to change it from without.
Voting is not enough. If you want to change the discussion, if you want to change the direction, you've got to run for office. A vote is not enough because you have to challenge the system. And you have to have a platform to do that. And the way you do it is by running for office, understanding people. Politics is about people. And I fell in love with Danbury all over again by meeting its people. When you knock on over 4,500 doors, you meet all sides of Danbury. When you get to speak 3 languages while you're doing it, even deeper. Wow. And when you realize neighborhoods that no one had knocked on their door for decades. And, some people, they weren't interested in voting because they have also imported their own ill sentiments about politics from their countries. Like, I don't want to get involved in that. I'm a citizen, but I don't want to do it.
I guess folks from a lot of countries, they're coming from a political system where they really didn't have even the semblance of a democratic process. A lot of countries have dictators.
Right, and when we're looking at South and Central America, for instance, in Brazil, you're obligated to vote, right? So you cannot get any government-issued document unless you vote. Because the theory pretty much is you can't be a part of the system that you don't want to be a part of building, right? So are people really voting? They have to vote.
Right, yeah, and what types of choices have they had historically in Brazil?
Oh, we have over 23 major political parties. There's so many coalitions that you can't define platforms. It's actually the opposite problem of the United States because they have too many parties to choose from.
Your kitty cat says someone is trying to call you.
Oh, kitty cat again.
No, sorry, that's somebody else calling me. Or it's Basil, who knows?
It could be Basil, yeah.
Could be. But at any rate, and I'm not going to answer, and I can't reach down and disengage it.
Bye, Basil.
But at any rate, and Israel's very much the same way, where they have 100 political parties, and they have to form governments based on coalitions.
Right.
And so you have to sometimes get into agreements with folks that you maybe only have like 10, 20, 30% agreement
Right.
with. But I think there's some benefit to that in a way.
There is, I think really Brazil right now, first I'll speak about my other home, right?
Yeah.
It's on this end of the spectrum of that, where the United States is on this end of the spectrum,
Yeah.
right? We only have two real parties.
And some people say we really only have one political party.
Yeah, it's basically a weird game of chess,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where here in Brazil, you can't even define your teams anymore because it's gotten so diverse.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that my dream of dreams
Mm-hmm.
is a real independent party, a third party, that could be more moderate. And I think that until that dream comes true, young people running on either party, they're confident enough in the process and understanding that it may take once, twice, or three times to get in there.
Yeah.
But sticking to their values, sticking to what they believe in, can really change this thing up.
We're actually working on that. At least I am. I don't know how many people I know that are on on that platform with me. We're really working on putting together a political party which involves both liberals and libertarians. And liberals and libertarians have a lot in common against corporate prisons. They believe that the war on drugs is basically a sham. A lot of for and against a lot of the same things, against spying and things of that nature. We're going to come back and do a second show, but on the way out from this show, I want to make a mention of, again, Tribuna, because Tribuna publishes their articles in 3 separate languages. Every article's in 3 languages.
Yeah.
And the beauty of that is, first of all, you're going to be able to read the article most likely, but secondly, you're going to be able to read the article in your principal language, and then read the article again in a second or a third language, and do a little self-teaching about that language. You can make that transition. But it's been Progressive Soup. I'm David Stevenson. Now, Emanuela Palmares, and we'll see you tomorrow at 12:30.
Thank you for having me.
Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back. What happened to 30 seconds?